I left that day and never looked back. I don't know what was in that room or what it wanted, but I do know one thing. It wasn't finished. So yeah, be careful with old buildings, folks. Sometimes the walls are holding on to more than just memories. Hey everyone, welcome back. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, and make sure that bell is on, especially if you're into unsettling stuff. Tonight's story? This one's personal. It still gives me chills just thinking about it. It all started about 6 months ago when I moved into my new apartment. The place wasn't anything special, a bit run down, but cheap, and I needed to save some money. The building had that old, worn-out charm, like it had a lot of stories it wasn't telling. The first weird thing I noticed was the silence. Now, I've lived in apartments my whole life, so I'm used to the usual city noise. Neighbors, traffic, footsteps in the hallway. But this place? Dead quiet. It was like the walls absorbed sound. I never heard anyone, not even the people in the unit next door. That was strange because the building was supposedly fully rented out. About a week after I moved in, I started hearing this faint knocking sound. It would come and go, always at the same time, around 2 a.m. At first, I thought it was just the pipes, or maybe the heating system. But then I realized the knocks had a rhythm to them, like someone was tapping slowly on the wall. 3 knocks, then silence. 3 more knocks, then silence. It didn't seem random. I tried to ignore it, but the sound became more persistent. One night, out of curiosity, I knocked back. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe for it to stop, but instead, I heard something that made my blood run cold. The knocks changed. It wasn't 3 knocks anymore. It was just one, louder than before, like whoever, or whatever, was knocking knew I had responded. That's when things started to get really strange. Every night, the knocking would get closer. First, it was coming from the far wall. Then, it was right behind my bed. Then, from the ceiling. It felt like it was trying to get into my room, trying to communicate. One night, I decided to do some investigating. I asked the building manager if anyone else had complained about strange noises. He gave me this odd look and said, "You're in Unit 14, right?" I nodded, and he hesitated before telling me something I really didn't want to hear. He said, "That room's been empty for years. No one stays long. Weird things happen in there." I tried pressing him for details, but he just muttered something about bad energy and walked away. Not exactly comforting, right? I did some digging online about the building, and sure enough, Unit 14 had a bit of a reputation. There were vague posts on local forums, with people talking about how they felt uneasy in the room, like they were being watched. A few mentioned hearing knocking sounds, but no one stayed long enough to figure out what it was. That night, the knocking started again, but this time, it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from inside the room. I couldn't see anything, but I felt this presence, like something was there, watching me. The air got heavy, thick, like I was being suffocated by the silence. I didn't sleep at all that night, just lay there in the dark, waiting for the sound to stop. But it didn't. The next morning, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I packed up some stuff and left to crash at a friend's place. But before I left, I did one last thing, something I probably shouldn't have done. I knocked on the wall again, just once. Nothing happened at first, but as I was about to walk out the door, I heard it. The sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway just outside my apartment. I rushed to the peephole, expecting to see someone there, but the hall was empty. Just as I was about to pull away, I heard a single knock, right on the other side of the door. I didn't wait around to see what would happen next. I grabbed my keys and left, locking the door behind me. A few days later, I went back to the apartment to grab the rest of my stuff. The knocking had stopped, but the silence was worse. It was like the room was holding its breath, waiting for me to come back. As I was packing the last of my things, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was a small door, almost hidden in the corner of the bedroom wall, like it had been painted over to blend in. It was locked, and there was no key in sight. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to it. I grabbed a screwdriver and started prying at the edges. Eventually, the door creaked open, and behind it was a narrow, dark space, like a crawl space or some kind of storage area. But what really freaked me out was what was inside. It wasn't empty. There were scratch marks on the walls, deep and jagged, like someone or something had been trying to get out. And scattered across the floor were small, broken pieces of what looked like an old telephone. There was also something else, a note, yellowed with age, stuffed into the corner. I unfolded it, and the handwriting was almost impossible to read, but I made out one sentence. "It's still here. I left that day and never looked back." I don't know what was in that room or what it wanted, but I do know one thing. It wasn't finished. So yeah, be careful with old buildings, folks. Sometimes the walls are holding on to more than just memories.